I'm getting ready to visit my friend Stephen, who's a master craftsman. You're not going to want to miss this. Hi everyone, and welcome to Fun to Know with Carol. I'm Carol, here weekly to help you connect with your curiosity. So if you're new to this channel, thanks so much. And for my returning viewers, thank you as well for joining me. So I'm very excited to introduce someone to you who I think will help to pique your curiosity. At least he did mine when it comes to woodworking. Now that's something that I've always thought, oh my goodness, I could never afford all those tools that you need for woodworking, let alone have the ability to do it. But Stephen makes it look so easy. He's going to show us some of his essential tools that he thinks any beginner might need to have. And then he's also going to share some of his projects. So stick around to the end so that you can get inspired with some of the projects that Stephen has done over the years. And let's hear how he started out. Tell me how you got started in woodworking.
Well, the very first job I ever got, I was 10 years old. My dad got me a job working for an older man that ran a furniture refinishing business. And so we would take these antiques, and this is in Wisconsin, and we would strip the finish off, and then we would wait for that to dry. We'd pressure wash it and get all the old varnish or paint or whatever was on it. We'd get all that off. And then it was my job to rebuild these things, make sure everything was tight again, glue up all the joints that had loosened, fix anything that was broken, and then put a finish on them.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
And so that's how it all started.
Well, that sounds like the hardest part, doing all the stripping and all of that. That's a lot to ask a teenager to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I was only getting paid $2 an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And the other weird thing about that whole story is the guy was an alcoholic, and I could only work for him till noon.
Oh.
Because after that he'd start getting mad at me and yell at me, and he'd forget it all happened by the next day, but he was crazy.
Oh my.
So,
good experience.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about a lot of things on that job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it that kind of piqued your interest and made it more than just a job?
Well, if you look at how antiques are made, you see that this was all done with hand tools, and many of them were made around the turn of the century. And some of the joinery and the techniques that these people used are just absolutely fascinating. And nothing is built like that nowadays. And so it really became an interest that I always wanted to pursue, you know, when I got older, wink, wink. And and eventually one day I had a motorcycle accident, and I thought, well, I better start the woodworking. And so in 1995 I bought a table saw, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So if someone was just getting started, would they need to have a table saw?
No. There's a great set of hand tools, and I'll show you some that you can get. Very small toolkit you could have, and you could do 99% of all the woodworking you want. Even big things. And thankfully, these are pretty available and not very expensive nowadays.
Oh, good.
So there's plenty of options. Now, the reason people buy all the fancy tools is it makes lots of things easier, right?
Sure.
And you have more capacity, right? You can buy rough lumber and it's cheaper, and you can make it however thick you want, and you can sand it however you want. But you don't really need all that to make most things. So.
You can probably make bigger things with those tools as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that you want to show us.
Okay, sure. Let's go in the shop. So when you buy raw wood like this, a lot of times it's rough on the outside, and a lot of times it's not square. So you see it rocks on the table. It's not flat at all. And if we measured it, it's probably not square either. So this edge and this edge don't come to a 90-degree corner, right? And that's why people would buy tools like a planer and a jointer to square these edges up so that you can then cut smaller pieces of wood from it, and they will all be square. So that's kind of how raw wood comes, and people buy it like this because it's less expensive. Now you can go to Home Depot and you can get a nice piece of wood that has perfect square edges all the way around. It's just more expensive.
Okay.
Okay. So, and a couple of the tools that I would first go with are, I laid some out here. So, you know, the Japanese have been doing woodworking a lot longer than we have. And a lot of people have adopted the Japanese tools. So this is what's called a Japanese pull saw. There's different names for them too. But this one is a pull saw. It has two different sides. One is very fine, and that's for cross cutting. And this is a coarser cut, and this is for cutting the lengthwise a piece of wood, ripping a piece of wood. And so these are interesting. Their blades are very thin. You can bend them with your hand easily. And the way they work is when you're cutting, you cut on the pull stroke, right? American saws, you push, and that's why the blade is thicker.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this one you pull, and so as you're pulling, it's in tension, and it doesn't really have to be so strong, and so they can get away with a thinner line, right? And so when you pull this, you can see real quickly, it makes a beautiful cut, and you real quickly you can control that and make it perfectly straight, and it's super useful and fun.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
wow.
It's quiet. Yeah. It doesn't waste a lot of wood. It doesn't make a lot of sawdust. It's a really good option. The other thing that I use is Japanese chisels, this is a Japanese chisel. So these are different from American chisels a little bit because they have soft metal laminated to hard metal, and the back is hollow. And you see it's very sharp. I didn't really clean it up or anything, but it's a mirror edge on the back and almost a mirror edge on the front as well. And the benefit of this is that the hard steel that's laminated to the soft steel gives you a great combination of it's tough and it's sharp and stays sharp, okay? And so really, you know, you have a saw, you have a chisel, you have some marking tools. I think a little square like this would be very important, and a good pencil. I use these pencils that have this very fine tip on them so you can mark a nice straight line. And then the other thing you'll need is a plane, and you can get a plane like this. Is a little bit more expensive. I have other ones that are, this is a very common one right here. Is one you could buy at any Home Depot or hardware store in the United States for probably $30 or $40, right? And you sharpen this up, and then you can use this to take small edges off or soften an edge of a board or whatever. And it doesn't look like it's a super powerful tool, but honestly, these are the most powerful tools in my shop.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
You can take 1/1000 of an inch of wood off if you want, right? Yeah. And the other thing I thought I'd show is this is a set of carving tools. These are old carving tools. This is how they used to be sold years and years ago, but these sets are still available. And if you want to do like carving, you would get wood like this, balsa wood or maybe basswood, and then you can carve it by hand. And a lot of people get into that. And there's books and wonderful YouTube videos making little snowmen and Santa Clauses and sailors.
Sure.
So really, that's all you really need to make many things.
Those are the essentials.
Yeah, that's the essentials. And of course, you're going to be drilling and fastening. So you're going to probably need a cordless drill. And those are absolutely fantastic. They've gotten so much better over the years. Even little tiny ones are just super powerful and easy to control. And then you buy some drill bits.
As you can see, this is a well-stocked workroom. Let's take a look at some of the projects Stephen has done in his home.
Okay, Carol, so this is one thing. When I bought this house, it didn't have any counters. This was just paint on top, and we wanted to kind of keep this craftsman style look going through the room, so we made all these counters, and this ended up being an interesting structure. So we had used flat plywood obviously for the center, and then we made this edge structure, and I was assembling it and I realized that somewhere I made an error. I couldn't figure out why, and it turns out it's this piece right here. Okay, this piece is a transition, and it fixed an error, and actually my wife figured it out. So I had a pile of wood from the planer, and I mixed up this board with all my other boards. This one is thicker than all these other boards. So these are all one thickness, one thickness, one thickness, and this one's thicker. And obviously you can't go from a thin board to a thick board unless you do some special magic. And so here we have a board that starts thin, and it gets thicker and then joins perfectly to this other one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty precise.
One thing you end up doing is solving problems with woodworking.
And
Lots of ways to solve
learning along the
problems.
way.
Yeah.
And some beautiful shelves here.
Yeah.
All
The shelves are all done with templates so that they fit each opening perfectly.
So as with most basements, there is a lot of ductwork and not too much usable space, but lo and behold, usable space has happened because of Stephen's ingenuity and craftsmanship. Stephen, tell us what you've done here.
Well, we had this space and it was all dirt at one point, and I thought it could be more useful, and so we engineered concrete retaining wall, basically took all the dirt out, put in a concrete floor, and then we did all this woodwork to make the walls and the soffits and the ceiling so that we could enclose all the utilities down here that are buried in the walls. And then we put in all these countertops. I actually put these in myself and finished them in place, and it was somebody rejected them, actually. They were putting them in the kitchen, and I bought them used, and they were unfinished. And then we did an interesting ceiling project here. This is simple plywood, but we did edge it. But we had to design a way to move the plywood left, right, and up and down on all four corners so that we could level it and align it. They're all independently hung and easy to remove if we want to get to the utilities under the house. So this is an area that I have that I use for electronics repair, and I put in these workbenches so we have a little extra space to do things down here. The joining two big thick maple workbenches was an interesting project, as was designing brackets that hold it so that there's no supports in the front. But it worked out great, and we put in a surfboard rack, and then we discovered this is kind of a dark area down under here, and we thought we could design a light for that. And I always wanted to experiment with bending plexiglass, and so I did a project, that's my dog, I did a project where we bent plexiglass and then we put veneer on it, and then we made that into a light. And here, I can turn it on for us. And so basically, that's a LED light that's shining through maple burl veneer.
Just beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, just kind of lights up the space.
It does. It does. Above and below. Yeah. So this has been a fascinating tour of beautiful workmanship. Thank you to Stephen for his willingness to share with us. And I hope you've been inspired to take the next step if you're interested in woodworking. I'll put some links in the description box below for places that might be helpful for you and recommendations from Stephen. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.